On today's episode of Sources, we'll shine light on the work being done by Blossom Inc., a non-governmental organization here in Guyana. This organization is dedicated to supporting and empowering children who have suffered abuse, providing them with care, resources, and opportunities they need to heal and thrive. From offering safe spaces to essential counseling services, Blossom Inc. is playing a vital role in transforming the lives of vulnerable children in the community. Join us as we explore their impactful efforts and hear stories of resilience, hope, and recovery. Welcome to Sources. I'm your host, Svetlana Marshall. A few weeks ago, we started a very important conversation on child abuse, and today we'll continue that conversation. And to do so with me, I have the program manager of Blossom Inc., Leanna Thompson. Leanna, thank you so much for coming here today.
You're welcome.
And so, Leanna, Blossom Inc. has been in existence for more than 10 years. Before we get into the issue of child abuse, tell me about the organization, what it does, the work it has been doing for 10 plus years.
So Blossom Inc. is a national non-governmental organization that operates Child Advocacy Center. As you mentioned, we've been in operation for over 10 years. Now we like to say like a decade or so. And we work primarily with child sexual abuse. So working with victims that have been affected by sexual violence and exploitation. And what type of service we provide is mostly, so we have various services that deals with child sexual abuse. So we have our direct interventions, that is our forensic interviewing process. We have our mental health therapy services. We have victim and court support services. So those are like our direct core services. Then we have our prevention and education program where we go into the communities, mostly the interland communities, and we educate persons about the prevalence of child sexual abuse, the impact of child sexual abuse here in Guyana, and some of the responses that communities can take in preventing or responding to child sexual abuse. We do have our advocacy whereby we're working with stakeholders to develop policies, to amend legislations, and just so that the overall outlook of child sexual abuse is looked in a different light, and so that our intervention then can be targeted. So we work in a multidisciplinary fashion, whereby we work with the police, we work with the Childcare and Protection Agency, we work with the parents and guardians, and we work with health, we work with education to respond, because child protection is everybody's business and it has to be like a collaborative effort. As well, we do have our extended services to the migrant and host community. So we work with migrant children and families to provide various types of psychosocial support, and that can look differently for every family.
Yes. So in 2024, we've seen that there, according to the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, there were more than 4,000 child abuse cases or cases of child abuse, and of that number, 1,200 were cases of sexual abuse. What this figure tells you?
It's, what can I say? It shows how the state of our children in our society, because if the numbers are so high, and the numbers climb every year, right? Because it shows, it can be look like a twofold, where there's two sides to the coin. One, before the Child Advocacy Centers, reporting numbers were very low. Outcomes and justice was also low. But now persons are more comfortable to report. So it tells you that the service is working, but it shows you that the state in which our children live in our society today, you know, because oftentimes when you look at that number and you look at who the perpetrators are and you look at how often these reports are being made, it tells you, it gives you a vision of what our society looks like for children.
Also, because of the available services and greater confidence in the system, more and more persons are coming forward.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that's why you probably would see a spike.
Yes.
So when it was lower, it is not a case where
It was absent.
It was absent. It
Yes.
didn't exist. It existed, but it just wasn't reported upon.
Correct.
But now you have a greater number of cases being reported and dealt with. Walk me through the process. If, say for example, I'm a victim of child abuse, sexual abuse, what happens then? I come, I make a report to you. How does it work?
So for children, it works twofold, because for children, the line of which we follow, the protocol of which we follow is different from an adult. But we are talking about child sexual abuse. So if you are the victim, you're going to disclose to somebody, whether that be your friend, whether that be your teacher, whether that be your parents, whether that be the social worker at your school. Once you make that report, that person is then mandated to report to the Childcare and Protection Agency, because we're just an umbrella service that provides specialized services to the childcare and to the police. So once that report is made to the Childcare and Protection Agency, a report is then made to the police. Then once the report is made to the police, it comes to the CAC. Once the CAC is involved, so that child is not telling her story here, there, and everywhere. It's just more of getting the initial information. You take the initial information, and then we bring the child to the CAC, a child-friendly space where the child tells her story in a recorded interview, where it's observed by the multidisciplinary team. You have the police, the caseworker, as I mentioned, and that child share factual information to help the police in their investigation, right? So that's the process of the reporting. On the other hand, if you're not the person that's reporting, you have a parent that suspect child sexual abuse, the initial thing is not for you to sit down and get all the information from the child, whatever information. Oh, mommy, dad raped me, dad had sex with me, this is what dad did to me. It's not my responsibility as a parent to gather as much information from the child. My initial reaction should be to take the child to the Child Protection Agency, then follow the legal steps. The report is made to the police, who's the legal body who will conduct the investigation, and then that interview is conducted by a trained forensic interview, either at Blossom Inc. or another child advocacy center, and then that statement is written up. The statement is handed over to the police conduct the forensic interview, that file jacket is then sent off to DPP, and then DPP makes recommendation as to whether to go ahead with charges based on the information, whether more information is needed, so like a second forensic interview or further interview is needed, and from that it then states where it goes.
So the victim would not have to tell the police, give the police a statement, Human Services or Childcare and Protection a statement, then Blossom Inc. a statement.
Ideally, that's not what it's supposed to be, right? So because remember, you're dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
And with trauma comes a lot of distress. And for a child to retell her story every stages of intervention, it creates re-victimization. So we want to eliminate that as possible. And so that's how we come up with this one-stop model. And we do it in a multidisciplinary fashion, whereby the child sits down with that trained person who is child-friendly, who is warm, who is welcoming in a space. And then that interview is then watched, or witnessed by these various persons, key persons that are a part of that intervention plan.
As a result of this system, the reporting mechanism in place, and the way the judicial system is set up, the police system is set up, and of course Blossom Inc. and all the other centers working to to conduct the forensic interview. Do you see stronger cases being put before the court and an increased number of prosecutions?
Yes, absolutely. Because in 2014 there were only 2 convictions, and to date we have over 1,000, over 100 convictions. So you have seen the justice system has improved or has increased over the years that the Child Advocacy Center has been in place.
Okay. Now, you also provide counseling services. Tell me about those services.
So we work in an evidence-based fashion. So we use an evidence-based model, which is the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that does, it's a 8-step model used to provide coping skills for children. As I said, trauma, when you're going through that traumatic experience, we're dealing with emotional distress, we're dealing with physical reaction or behavioral problem, different changes within our body, whether that's psychological, whether that's emotional, whether that's physical. So that therapy model is about 16 to 20 sessions. It helps children to gain coping skills or the tools necessary to deal and work through those emotions. Because if something bad happens to you, obviously you want to be like, oh, what is this? And it's new emotions that's coming up. How do I work through that emotion? So the therapist help that person to walk through those emotions, and then in turn give them that skills to then utilize in their various settings or environments when they're not at the CSC, whether it's home, school, and so forth.
How helpful those sessions? Have you seen cases where, despite being sexually violated and abused, children have been able to turn a new page, lead a new life, and overcome the challenges that come with child abuse?
There are various success stories, and I think I could sit here and talk about them for days, But as you know, in the old therapy is a taboo. Long ago people used to think therapy is for mad people, but no, it provides you with emotional release, right? And I think once children complete their full course of therapy, you see that transformation. You see the parents would normally make reference to the grades that have improved. Maybe they're no longer bedwetting, maybe they're no longer outrageous, maybe they walk through their process. They see that step, because we just don't work with children, we work with the entire family, and so you hear those comments from parents as to the impact children are going back to school, because oftentimes one of the consequences of rape is that persons can get pregnant. Children become pregnant. You see the reintegration system is working, where children can be reintegrated if that is something that they want. And we see that. We have observed that children are now, finishing school, writing CXC. They are in a better place mentally, once they have access that type of therapy services that we have.
Okay. And so these services that you offer, the counseling services, do persons need to come to your fixed location, or do you go out to wherever they are, if they're in Letem, if they're in Bartica, wherever they are?
So Blossom, we have 8 child advocacy centers in 5 regions. So regions 1, 2, 3, no, not 3. I'm sorry about that. Region 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10. So we have 3 centers in Region 1 in the 3 sub-district, and then we have 2 centers in Region 10, which is Kokwani and Linden. So we do have, most of the therapy sessions are in person, but when COVID hit us in 2010, we had to think about alternative ways, and we started to do teletherapy or telepsychosocial support, whereby we can still help clients, because rape didn't stop during COVID. Right, so that system has then transfer into our everyday interventions still today. For when you're talking about ideally, like for Region 4, persons come here at the center, it's done in person. But when we're talking about Region 1, where it's harder to reach communities, the communities are so far, and it's so hard to navigate, especially in terms of how high transportations are and stuff like that. Oftentimes we take the service into the community. So like, for example, I talked about prevention and education. When we're out, we always walk with a therapist or a psychotherapist to deal with persons that want to talk to us or want to receive that type of service. So we always have that person on board with us. So we often take the services, or we can have it in person. It's done both ways.
You mentioned prevention and
education.
Yeah. And so as we prepare to wrap up today's interview, what are some of the preventative messages that you would often share with people when you out there that you would like to share with the audience here today, highlighting the issue of sexual abuse and the services? Closing remarks.
I think my favorite thing to say to this question is for us not to have a bystander approach. We need to remove ourselves from, if it's not happening to me, it's not my business. If it's not my child, it's not my business. Children is everybody's business, you know, and we all have that responsibility to protect, you know, to safeguard children, and we have to have that approach. If you see something, say something. You know, if you don't know what to do, our numbers are all over. You know, we're on social media. Try to reach out in as much as you can. You know, I think just a success story I want to tell you.
Okay.
We were in Coquan. We're currently doing this series called the Pepper Pot series in Coquan. It's a preventative and education. And I think someone got my number. My numbers aren't on the flyers or anything, and someone got my number, a concerned citizen somewhere far out in the far end community, like Hururu, and he called. He's like, hey, I got a report, this is happening, bap 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 bap, you know, and we were able to connect him to various services. He didn't have to, but he saw it as his responsibility too. And I think if we all take that approach, you know, we are creating a better society for our children. You know, because we don't know when our day will come. You know, I'm not wishing that on anybody, but I want us to take that approach, you know, and not the bystander approach. And if we could move away from that, we create a better society for our children.
Okay. Any other additional information you would want to share before we come to the end? I wouldn't want to take that away from you regarding the services that you provide.
I think for being in existence for 10 years, I think it's working. The model is working. The system can be slow because we're dealing with a lot of external and internal factors that can cause the system to be slow. However, it works. When it works and it works well. And if we follow the guidelines or the protocols, you know, and I think we believe, you know, that it does. It really and truly works. We have seen it. They are, you know, evidence of it working.
And you've seen cases put before the court and persons being prosecuted and jailed. And so it's important to know that the system is working. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Sources. I want to thank Leanna for joining me here today, and I want to wish you well. And so I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall. Take care.
Let's remember to protect our children.